Mr. Ashdown, Paul O'Grady here from Croatia Radio. How are you?
Very well indeed, Paul.
I won't keep you too long. Just one personal question to start. The name Paddy, it's an Irish name.
It is.
Is there an Irish connection?
There is. My mother was from the north and my father was from the south, and although they christened me Jeremy, when I went to school I had such a broad Northern Irish accent that they called me Paddy.
There you go. All right, that was an issue. I was wondering about that one. All right, we'll get you started straight away. Mr. Ashdown, thank you very much for joining us today. Would you be able to outline your role in BIH for us in Bosnia and Herzegovina?
Well, Paul, it's very easily stated. When the parties to the Dayton Peace Agreement, which of course put a close to that terrible war, which 250,000 lost their lives and 1 million were made homeless in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the local representatives, that is the representatives of the three warring parties in Bosnia and Herzegovina, together with the two neighboring states, President Tudjman for Croatia, President Milosevic for Serbia, signed a peace agreement. And in that peace agreement, they asked that the international community should have a presence here, call the High Representatives, with the power that is invested in me. So, unlike the situation in Iraq, we don't arrive as a result of an invasion, but we arrived as a result of an invitation, and the powers that I exercise here and my job is part of the peace agreement that has maintained the peace highly successfully, as it happens, in Bosnia and Herzegovina for 9 years.
Could you outline for us perhaps your team's progress in your goals of stabilization and normalization?
Well, I think my team would be wrong, Paul. I mean, I think it has been one of the really extraordinary miracles of peace stabilization. I mean, just consider the country you and I come from. I'm a Northern Irishman. I was one amongst the first British troops to march into Belfast in 1969. That's 35 years ago. They still stone children for being the wrong religion on their way to school in Belfast. The problem is not solved. There are still car bombs let off. There are still murders. There are still kneecappings. None of that happens in Bosnia and Herzegovina only 9 years later. I was on the Cyprus Peace Conference in 1974. Cyprus remains a divided island. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, there is full freedom of movement. You know that in the Basque country of Spain, 25 years after the war started, you can't have elections without violence and car bombs. Here the BIH authorities and people carry out their own elections under their own steam, completely violence-free. So there is a long way to go, but it is absolutely amazing how far this country has come. I know of no country that has come further from war, let alone such a terrible war, to peace. Now, there's a long way to go. Croatia has got to the gates of Europe. Bosnia is only starting that journey. It takes a long time. They won't complete it quickly. The peace is not yet stabilized, though I think pretty near destabilized. So no one is doubting how far there is to go. But what is clear is that the worst of the journey is behind the people of BIH now. And although the international community has some reason to feel proud for that we are on the edge of the world's first post-war successful peace stabilization mission. We can feel a certain degree of pride in that, though we have made mistakes. The real heroes of this, however, are the people of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Bosniak, Serb, Croat alike. They're the heroes.
You mentioned there in part of the progress that the election process internally being run has been of some success. How important has that process been, a free election?
Oh, I think that's absolutely vital. I mean, people complain that, of course, what they've done is re-elected the nationalists. But then, what is a nationalist these days? I mean, look at the HDZ in Croatia. It's absolutely not the HDZ of Franjo Tudjman. It has been translated under Mr. Sanader's leadership from a party that may well have a, quote, nationalist, unquote, name. It nevertheless is a standard has become a standard conventional centre-right European democratic party with European ideals. And we see that process beginning in Bosnia and Herzegovina. At all events, the people in this country are able to exercise their own right through the ballot box, choose their own government. And whereas in the past the international community sought to interfere in that process, nowadays we certainly wouldn't even try.
Have you received full cooperation from the various political and administrative representatives working throughout BIH?
No, of course not. I mean, look, if I said this country is still riddled with corruption and organized crime and criminality, I'm only saying what happens after a war. I mean, This isn't a Balkan problem. This isn't a Bosnian problem. Go to Italy after the Second World War. Go to Austria. I quite often advise people to see that great film, The Third Man. Remember the one with Orson Welles? Well, that showed you Vienna 7 years after the war, riddled with corruption. So corruption stalks after war like a dark shadow, but it is deeply, deeply ingrained in this society from the bottom to the top. We're beating it back now, but that includes political structures. So are some people in politics happy that I'm loosening their fingers from around the corrupt structures that pay them so much money? Of course they're not. And some will resist that process. But the understanding that this country has to change, its commitment to the reform process, the fight back against corruption and in favor of law and order and justice has started and is making good progress. So I'm perfectly confident that in a number of years' time, let's not at this stage speculate how many, this country will join the family of European nations, which Croatia is about to join, and will be regarded in Europe as one of its little jewels.
You just mentioned Croatia. How do you think the changes in BIH will directly affect Croatia, its people, its economy?
Well, I think it's the other way around, really. I mean, the changes in Zagreb have hugely affected BIH, and much for the better. The last government, the Račan government, the present government, the Sanader government, have, with an increasingly constructive spirit and frame of mind, engaged, as they're entitled to do under the Dayton Agreement, but engaged not destructively to tear the state apart, which was the case in the old days, but constructively to help build it. And I think the idea that Croatia has proved that when Europe says we want you to join us in the Balkans, they're not lying, they're serious about it. So it shows not only, Croatia has shown not only that it can be done, but that Europe wants it to be done. And that's a very important message for BIH. Now, if I spoke to Sanader the other day, he said to me and Foreign Minister Žužul, we want good partners, we want a thriving economy, we want a stable state in Bosnia and Herzegovina. That will help Croatia. He's right there too. But nevertheless, Croatia's position increasingly in the Balkans as a leader on the European process is a very important asset to the whole region and extremely important for Bosnia and Herzegovina.
It looks like a bright future, you think?
Well, it's going to be tough, Paul. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. The road is still long and it's still pretty stony. There are some big problems to be overcome. But if I had sat in this glorious little city of Sarajevo back 5 or 6 years ago and said that within 3 or 4 or 5 years you'll be at the gates of Europe and at the gates of NATO, I'd have thought that impossible. That was an impossible thing to happen. But it has happened, and that's where we are. There's a long way to go, but there's no doubt about how far we've come.
Well, thank you for talking to us today very much,
Pleasure.
Mr. Paddy Ashdown.
Look after yourself. Thank you for having me on the programme. Good luck.
Thank you.
Bye.